Okay, wait,
We're-
not quite live it, and we're live. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to demo day number 6. If you count like programmers, and 7 if you count like normal people. Yeah, of the Foundry. So we've done
Maybe
quite a bit.
just
Mhm,
sorry to interrupt now, but if
mhm.
LNA, if you would mute now, because I think it's focused on your video because it thinks you're talking. I think that's.
Well, which one is me?
I will mute.
No, it doesn't
Oh,
actually, Logan. You don't see it correctly. The actual stream
okay.
shows it correctly. None of us see the stream correctly. If you go to YouTube, then you see
Okay.
who's actually talking.
Okay. All right, my bad. Sorry to interrupt. Please
Okay,
continue.
so okay, let's try that again. Going live from now. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to Foundry Demo Day number 6 or number 7, depending on how you count. Yeah, so today's demo day is going to be a Q&A with Logan. We have a bunch of questions ready where Logan is going to describe to us why Foundry is important. I'm going to try and really hit him with some fundamental questions. So if any of you have any fundamental questions you want to hit us with on either the YouTube channel or if you join the call and you ask it here, we're actually going to be doing a giveaway of some Fry tokens. So it's 1,000 Fry basically for every coherent question that's not a duplicate, and we're going to decide at the end on a prize as to which question was the most profoundly challenging for Logan to answer. So so without further ado, Logan, I think over to you. Give us a quick project update. Where are we? What's going on? What are we up to?
Okay, so project update. I think the most salient thing right away is we're a week away from launching the token sale. And that token sale is unlike a lot of sales in that it's going to be going for over 19 months. We have a lot of reasons for that, but I think one of the biggest reasons to start with as to why it's that long is because the token sale is, of course, partially about raising money, but it's also in large part about building up I'll say a healthy set of Fry holders, Fry being the token that we're selling. And that is important because we want Foundry to be able to make its own decisions. Because we're still building the governance mechanisms at the current moment, you and me and some of our other sort of people in the inner circle are controlling. We have certain private keys. But really what we want to rush as soon as possible is for this thing to have a life of its own and for us not to be in the driver's seat. And there's a few reasons for that, but that's definitely a goal we have. And so, yeah, in a week that sale will start. We've already minted some of the tokens, and the sale will mint quite a few more as it goes on. And so, and just another way to sort of phrase that is we've begun, as we are right now, we're starting to give away Fry tokens. So the people that are asking questions here, we're going to give some Fry tokens to every how'd you phrase it? Every coherent question, and then we'll give a bit of a top prize to somebody who asks what we think is the best question or the most challenging question. So that's where we're at. I'll just sort of to briefly talk about what we have done in the past and what we have completed is we have 2 products. We have a design for governance, and we have a marketing plan. And we have the white paper for the Foundry governance out. So that's sort of what we've done. That's where we are in terms of what we've produced. And then where we're going to go is as soon as we're sort of focused on the sale, of course, right now. But once the sale is up and running, we're going to be focusing almost entirely on. Well, now this is maybe Scott can say if he disagrees with this, but my conception of it is that maybe, roughly speaking, we'd be spending 60 to 70% of our effort on getting governance up and the rest on marketing the products that we already have. So that would be my overview of where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, I agree with that in the shorter term. I think it might even be higher in terms of the governance. So the governance, as I understand, as we have it right now, is we basically have an on-chain component, which is where the actual voting happens on how to move the money around. Then we have an off-chain component, which is basically so that people cannot waste a lot of gas and money and stuff reaching consensus on-chain, which are some interfaces and stuff that we need to build. And then there's an interface. Then there's the chain interaction interface part. So I would guess that that once the sale is live, that would probably be the vast majority of our effort. Although that would be pretty short-lived. I think we can get through that phase relatively quickly, and then our whole shift moves to marketing the two products that we already have. So marketing and iterating on Smoke Signal and Die Hard. So percentage-wise, I guess once governance version 1 is up, obviously the efforts there fall down quite a bit, and the majority of it moves over to actually making real market money from the two products.
Right, and just to add to that image, once we have governance version 1 up, the role that Team Toast plays, Team Toast being me, Skulk, and some other people, that we know we're no longer a crucial component. We will have a lot of experience and skills that will be sort of, I would say, valuable to Foundry, but we're no longer this crucial component that anyone can take as a given piece, for sure. And so I think at that point, our relationship to Foundry would be more like contractors. You know, I've done a lot of the Elm coding, and Skulk will have designed the governance, and so it's easy to imagine that Foundry will continue to demand those things, and so we will probably stay on to some degree as contractors. But as far as the driver's seat, that's something we're eager to cede to Foundry, which it just touches on my earlier point of the priority really is to get Foundry independent and capable of making decisions, and quite bold decisions, I'll say, as soon as possible.
Yeah. That brings me to an interesting point. So I think we can smoothly transition over into the question and answer session of this. There's a very cool white paper written by a guy. I hope I'm sorry, man. Everyone butchers my name, so I'm going to butcher your name, brother. But Thibault Foundry wrote the Continuous Organizations white paper, which I'll put a link to that in the description on YouTube. But basically, the continuous organization is what DXDAO is based on. And he very specifically goes into a couple of objections against ICOs that I think is a good entry point for us to start with the Q&A here. So Logan, like, what exactly is to prevent the members of Team Toast from just, doing a raise and running off with the money, or not finishing anything that they've set out to do?
What is to prevent us from running away with the money? Yeah. Well, I would say on a technical level, there's not much. Technically speaking, let's say the first bucket goes up and people funnel through some DAI. We could essentially just remain silent, let that come in, but refuse to do any work. But the thing is that is just not, even from a game theoretical, purely rational, heartless perspective, it's just not a good long-term strategy. And that's without even considering our reputation. But let's just forget about the reputation for a moment, because it won't take long for it to become obvious that we're just not doing anything with the money in terms of the project. And especially at this point, we hardly have tons of marketing, so the initial income of money we get is not going to be anything major. And then now, if I can pull back in our reputation, we have over a year now of building these products. I think anybody who has those sorts of doubts, I think you can pretty easily go and look at what we've done, the Reddit posts we've made, all of our interaction with the community, and see that it's clear that we've built up. Not only have we demonstrated that we're putting the work in and that we're just capable in general of doing that, and that we seem to be honest, but also that it wouldn't make sense for us to take the money and run. It's a far more promising and lucrative proposal for us to just keep working on this stuff, and it should be clear that that's what we love to do. So that would be my answer to the question. Technically, nothing is really preventing us, but if you look at our history and you look at where we're at now, And if you read our white paper, I think you can pretty easily see that that's just not very plausible.
Okay. Okay. So let me just ask you this, right? So I think that was kind of the engineering answer to, could we technically do it for a short period of time, right? So let me ask the question from this angle, right? Given that the sale is 19 months long, so in other words, it will become apparent soon into the process that we are not pulling our weight. If we choose not to pull our weight, and hence we'll probably not raise a lot of money past a certain point. And secondly, given that the first priority is to get fully decentralized governance up and running, in which case we won't actually have access to much of the money because the decentralized organization will. I mean, under those circumstances, there are obviously certain tokens that team toasts control. So, given the tokens that they control, and given the fact that there's decentralized governance, maybe answer the question from that perspective of, well, if we run with the assumption that we're not going to, for the short window of time that we control a little bit of the sale money that comes in, well, we control it. I mean, would still involve almost all of us becoming dishonest. But after that point, what incentives do we have to actually work on the program? So outside of reputational, and historic behavior.
So that sounds like the question you actually meant to ask was, or that I misinterpreted. But anyway, it was like, given that we have Fry tokens, then we could run away with Fry tokens. And I was answering sort of, we could run away with the DAI. So with the Fry tokens, what prevents us from leaving with our Fry tokens and running off? Well, there's a lot of different answers here. One answer is, again, that to abandon the project would completely collapse the value of Fry tokens, that would just seem to be self-defeating to me. Now that it's possible that we could market it and try to do like a pump and dump thing, and then maybe we could run away with the tokens, get away. But I think, again, if you want to just look at the project, it becomes clear that that's not what we're doing. I mean, for one thing, you can just look at the level of marketing we're doing, and so that is an extremely poor strategy if we're going to try to do a pump and dump. So, and another thing another option that's available to us is that if the community really sees this as a significant danger, we can at any time just voluntarily time lock our tokens. And just speaking personally, I might do that anyway, just to make myself less of a legal target for litigation and stuff like that. I might just put my own tokens into a time lock contract, just so that I have less wealth to target personally, and also so I have less control over the thing. I mean, if we get governance up, but it's still early in the sale to where I'm let's say a voting whale, that is not actually a position I want to be in. So that also would motivate me to put a time lock on my tokens. Does that that's the answers that come to mind. No, go ahead.
Sorry, just make that last point, Bill, and then I'll ask my next question.
Well, I kind of forgot what the last point was. I wanted to answer the first, because I answered this in two parts, and there was something I wanted to add to the first, so I don't actually remember what it was.
So let me, okay, so all right. So from my perspective, a couple of things as well. So we have some internal members of Team Toast that put in some work completely at risk, and most of them free actually, or at an enormous discount to their normal rates. And the big thing is, like, most of us are, and it is a voluntary vesting, but most of us are down to actually vest the token. So that would be, in my opinion, the first reason why we have
time lock.
Sorry, correction. Yeah, to time lock the So to time lock the tokens. So in other words, we only really get a gradual stream of our tokens over a very long period of time. So so the idea is, if we don't do very much further things, and we go backwards. The other question that just came up in this white paper. So if you guys go look at the white paper, there are seven questions. Let me quickly run through them. Maybe that gives some context to where I'm trying to go with this. But the one thing is, like, will the team be able to create the product at all? Can the product be created on the timeline proposed? Can the product achieve a good user experience? Is the product deliverable? Will it be used at all? If users like the product, will the token capture any value? And if the token has value, will it still be a good investment? Right. So that's kind of like the context. And if you take those 7 questions in terms of how he asks them in his white paper, he does specifically say that these are the things that go wrong. Right. This is typically the stuff that actually, sort of like eventually cause the majority of these tokens to fall apart. I think we have, I think we've got pretty good answers on most of these things. And, will the team be able to create?
Can I actually just take that? So I think we have a distinct advantage in, okay, the question is this a scam? The question is this going to be a waste of my money? And I think we have a pretty significant, clear advantage in that, well, we have built products. These products are smart contract systems. They're actually built very close to the metal of Ethereum, and they're out there, and you can use them on mainnet today. So that, I think, is a really strong answer. A possible criticism you could have is that, well, they're not marketed, and so we haven't really tested the user experience. But I still want to point out that that is still, typically, when you hear about ICOs, the first thing you should ask is this thing even capable of being built? And I think we've shown that they are capable of being built. And the next step is to market. And that's part of what we need these funds for, is just to market. So I don't know, that's my answer to a lot of those first questions in that paper.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right, so Chris asked us, what is Fry?
What is Fry? Fry is a token for Foundry. So Foundry is a DAO, a decentralized organization. And although it might be more accurate to call it a decentralized corporation, that's a little bit more accurate, but we're using DAO just because that's the accepted term for pretty much what we're building. But in any case, Fry is very similar to a stock in a company with voting rights. So if you have Fry, not only do you have a vehicle that should grow in profit if Foundry itself is making money and making profit, you also have a way to actually steer Foundry. And you can do that by direct voting or by putting your voting weight behind somebody else and letting them vote for you in a representative kind of way. But that is what Fry is in terms of, I'll say that's what Fry does for the holder of Fry. It gives you access to the returns of Foundry, and it gives you control over Foundry, or influence, I should say, over Foundry. You can answer it another way, which is, what is Fry to Foundry? Fry to Foundry is the source of its intelligence. So Foundry is going to get up and move around and make decisions and invest in things, and it'll manage some .eth domains. And in that process, Fry is the source of all the intelligence of making those decisions. So Fry is the source of the proposals. So what are the options, first of all, of what we can do? And it's also the source of saying yes or no on all of those proposals. And again, these proposals can be simply moving money, but they'll also directly affect any Ethereum-based assets we have, like the .eth domain, or maybe some interactions in the DeFi space. So all of that will be the result of decision-making, and the heart of that decision-making is Fry.
Okay. My video come back on. Okay, so all right, I think that's a pretty cool answer. My next question is, what value does Foundry provide? Like, who are its stakeholders, and how does it serve those stakeholders?
Yeah. Okay, those actually strike me as two different questions. So the first one is, what value does Foundry provide? And I hear that more like to the world. What is its purpose, we could say? And for me, that purpose is pretty clear, or at least pretty inspiring, which is there are a lot of projects, entrepreneurial opportunities, let's say, that would increase the freedom of the world, but which are dangerous to personally support because you're going to piss off the people that currently have the power. So one example is Die Hard. So this is one of the two products that we built. And we actually aren't focusing on it as much anymore, partially because it's a dangerous product. Die Hard allows anyone anywhere to trade fiat currency for cryptocurrency, and this could work in specifically. It's really kind of built to work in jurisdictions that don't allow this kind of thing to happen. So Zimbabwe outlawed their crypto exchange, and Die Hard can work in Zimbabwe. That's kind of what it's engineered for. Now, if we were to market Die Hard deliberately right now as me, Logan, and Scalp and individuals, even if we were behind an organization, we face the ire of the nation state, right? We face the ire of anybody who has an interest in keeping those freedoms at bay and maintaining control over the gateway to and from crypto. So that sucks, because it means that it's not a simple question of, oh, let's build Die Hard, provide value, and make a profit. Because it's too dangerous for us as people. So Foundry is a way that someone with an idea can pseudonymously suggest this idea, maybe offer to work on this idea, and apply for support in the form of funding. And then others can pseudonymously fund this and play a part in the yes or no decision. And again, all pseudonymously. So then if you have something like Die Hard, which you think would make the world a better place and be profitable, you can basically use Foundry to breathe life into it, get funding for it, return the profit to the people who've helped you fund it, all in a way that is very resilient to, let's say, reactionary pressure from the power structures that whatever you have suggested threaten. That's the value of Foundry. And I think, just to sort of couch it a little more, we're going to need things like that. I think we're starting to see a lot of centralized institutions fail. Personally, I think the COVID thing is just the beginning of a much bigger shift. And as things fall apart, we will need bold things like Foundry. And boldness is, I think part of the power of Foundry is that it will be able to be bold. It will be able to do things that piss all the nations off, and yet it won't be able to be shut down. It makes me nervous to even say that, honestly, because we currently live in a world where to threaten those things is to put yourself on a lot of short lists. I don't know how many short lists I'm on, because I publicly say that this thing its purpose is to be threatening to those people, right? But that is also what makes it important to get Foundry up and going, is that we need a way for people to essentially start ignoring the fact that it pisses the powerful people off. It's time that we are able to ignore that and build what we want anyway. So that's what Foundry helps us do.
So maybe a simple objection that we received to that kind of a statement would be, what if Foundry tries to build something bad, right? And by something bad, that can be a lot of different things. There are clear definitions that I think very few people disagree with, like a thing that hurts people who don't, have any hurt coming to them. I think that's a pretty universally that would be viewed as bad, right? How would you answer that objective? And I mean, to make it slightly more nuanced, I think let's answer it in terms of things that people generally perceive might be bad, but that are actually good. And secondly, like, why is it unlikely maybe that Foundry would even build something bad?
Start with the second part of what you just said, which is what makes it unlikely that Foundry would actually build something that is bad. So when we say it's bad, what we mean is that were we to ask everyone in the world, most people would agree it's bad. Let's say that's like an operational definition of bad. The reason Foundry is unlikely to fund that stuff is because when you put a proposal to Foundry, you can't really put something by Foundry that is unpopular, at least to the Fry holders. So maybe part of the answer here is that it matters what is good and bad to the Fry holders. In fact, that's a better definition of what I just than what I just said about good and bad. When we talk about good and bad For Foundry, what we mean is what is good, what is judged good and bad to the fry holders. So to some degree, the answer to the question is we built Foundry in such a way to where if there's a proposal comes by that fry holders believe is bad, there's many ways in which that will, of course I don't want to say a strong word like guarantee, but it seems like it guarantees that those proposals will not pass if they're unpopular. Skulk, do you think I should go into some of the more technical details of that, or?
I think Ingrid wants to ask a question in this regard.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a bit of a question about this. So, for instance, essentially, marketing is going to be marketing will obviously be a key driving factor behind who will purchase fry, and that will essentially allow them to gain control over the voting rights. So, put in another way, may the best marketer win. So, for instance, how will this affect the projects that Foundry undertake? And, for instance, again, what if organized crime groups gain a large percentage of fry and voting rights?
Yeah, great question. And I think you're right. Let me first point out that your understanding is correct in that the marketing drive, yeah, depending on how we market it, depending on then also not, of course, it's not just us that is marketing it, but it's also people who are using the referral program. So how that grows the fry holder pool entirely determines, we'll say, the personality and preferences of Foundry. So the question is, like, what if a criminal organization takes over control of Foundry? I think part of the answer there is that you can't really have that happen quickly. Every bucket in the sale releases 30,000 fry. So let me put that a different way. No matter how, let's say I'm this criminal organization and I want to go take over control of Foundry, there's only 30,000 fry made from the bucket sale every 7 hours. So that means no matter how much money I put in, I can only get, I can increase the percentage of that 30,000 fry I get, but I can't go and buy out half of Foundry. Now that does get a little bit more complicated with secondary markets, but even on secondary markets, you can't go buy all the fry in the world because every bit of fry you buy, you're going to increase the price. And that will be especially true in the early days when it's extremely illiquid. So that's one part of the answer. Another part of the answer is that the original Team Toast here will have, let's see, of the 100 million fry that will be minted and dispersed by the end of the sale, Team Toast will have 40 million of that. And so we will sort of represent a large voting majority. And as time goes on, our part of the pie will shrink further. And so it's not like we will be jumping immediately into totally unmapped, the totally unmapped territory of complete control by fry holders. It will be a much more gradual thing, just in the manner of our shrinking influence. And then, of course, as that goes, as I said, we might make independent decisions. Like I'll say, okay, I don't feel comfortable holding this amount, and maybe I'll shrink it. But that will be a decision that we make individually as we go. And part of the calculus of that decision is the danger that you've just brought up.
So just to ask quickly, like, do you have examples of things that you're worried that Foundry might fund, and then and then maybe we can chat through what the game theory behind that would be, how that might actually practically pan out.
Well, sure. I mean, I guess a few examples. Organized crime, a lot of it surrounds sort of drugs, trafficking, and general things like that. I just want to know, as a purchaser of fry, that it's not going to be funding overall or projects that are perceived as bad, which is what Logan sort of covered beforehand.
But can you give us an example of something that you consider might?
She did. She did give us. And the one was drug trafficking. And I think that's actually maybe a good thing to dig into. Assuming you don't want to give us more examples, I'm happy to dig into that one.
Oh, it's more of an overall question than specifically relating to any kinds of organized crime, because there's so many. Let's just use that for now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the reason I like that one is because it's not clear that selling drugs is unethical. Um, and I think as the world shifts in the coming years, we're going to start answering and asking these tricky ethical questions. For example, Ross Ulbricht, I don't know exactly how you pronounce his name. He made a darknet market which did sell drugs, and he is now in jail for it. My personal opinion on that is that is wrong that he got put into jail. I don't think it's a discussion society will have to have as to whether selling drugs or having a drug marketplace is, let's say, evil or unethical. I suspect in that particular instance, fry holders would be pretty okay with, encouraging, let's say, the creation of another darknet market. Technically, there wouldn't be much point in that, I think, because there already are darknet markets, but it's still a good question to think about. If I can then, and LNA wants to speak, I see. I'm just going to finish this up. Let's move more to the morally dark stuff. For example, a slave trade. That would be one of the very darkest things. That is something that I find it hard to really believe or imagine fry holders would vote that in. I mean, from two directions. First of all, it's just going to be so unpopular that it's not going to be profitable. It would be really hard to sell that even purely on the terms of profit. And then secondly, we aren't dealing with purely game theoretical rational agents. We're dealing with humans, and humans generally are not going to vote in a slave trade. That's some dark fucking shit, And of course, to some degree, we'll have to be careful not to make sure that our fry holders that we're marketing to isn't made up entirely of people who want to sell slaves to other people. But that that doesn't seem hard to me. I think we really have to fuck up the marketing to end up in that scenario. But having said that, it's a good thing to keep in mind. And that is why curating a particular kind of fry holder is important to us and something we'll have to keep an eye on.
Alana, you had a question?
No, Logan just answered my question there about the darker side.
Okay. Ingrid, are you satisfied with that? Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, no, thank you.
Okay. So Alana also asked in the chat, so the first question here she has is, how big is Team Toast, and are you expanding or hiring? So this is a tough question for us to answer precisely.
Yeah, let me answer it quite carefully. So Skulk and I are on Team Toast. And then there is a number of people on Team Toast between 0 and 3, I'm just going to say. And beyond that, we're really not comfortable giving out details because that 0 to 3 people have privacy concerns due to the nature of this thing. And so that's the best answer we can give now as far as the current makeup of Team Toast. Are we hiring? Hiring is a tricky word. We are looking for people to be involved with us. And depending on the level of value add, we're very happy to share fry tokens that could come from the 10 million fry that is held in the Foundry treasury right now, or it could come from my personal stash or Skulk's personal stash or something like that. Just speaking again personally, if I met somebody who really lit up about this idea and they say, "Oh my God, I love Die Hard. I want to market the shit out of Die Hard, and I have this and that idea," I would quite happily, once I verify that they're not just full hot air, but if they can execute, I'm way happy to dilute my own shareholdings of Fry to onboard other people. So, and maybe just to answer your question a bit more fully, whether or not we're hiring is a tricky question, but we're definitely looking for more of a community. And we're very happy to share our fry with that community, especially if it means, because if we can do that right, actually what we can do is we can get Foundry to have its own independent spirit even before the governance comes along. The governance is going to help with that, obviously, because there'll be this mechanism by which you can vote and put proposals in, and then we really don't even have a steering wheel anymore. But even before that happens, if we can simply get, let's say, 10 other people, and they're each doing specific little things and taking some leadership in that, and then we're sharing our fry with them, that would make me quite relieved. Not only because it lowers my own risk, but also because the thing is more resilient, because there's more people working on it, and it becomes more amorphous and more intelligent as well. So we're definitely open arms to anybody who wants to contribute, and we will not be miserly about sharing our ownership of Fry with them. When it comes to salaries, it's a bit more of a difficult question at this moment, because we're still, well, part of the reason we're doing the sale is because we've run out of our own runway. But we're definitely open arms to involvement for sure.
I have another question. I'm remembering the whole R-Chain fiasco, where a really good team started off with a really good idea and then they just completely dropped the ball. What would keep Team Toast from somehow floundering, just down a destructive path, or losing sight of their goals, or something to that effect?
Can I give some context as to the R-Chain question before you answer?
Sure.
Okay, so basically the R-Chain is a very interesting blockchain project. It was endorsed by some pretty heavy hitters in the industry, most notably Vlad Zamfir was involved in it basically. What seemingly went wrong there is they had a co-op, and the co-op had a specific president, and eventually it turned out that the president was pretty much making all the decisions. He ended up almost unilaterally spending some ludicrous amount, like almost all the treasury funds, on buying a audio codec, because he's also a musician and he found that very interesting and pitched it as, well, it's the first product for R-Chain. It's going to be the thing that gives R-Chain traction. And needless to say, an audio codec didn't quite accomplish that. Lots of people lost a lot of faith. A lot of people left the project in the ensuing chaos. And that's kind of like what went wrong there. So that I would say that might be an example of somebody gaining control of the situation and crazy. By the way, welcome new random Jitzer.
Yes,
Okay.
I mean, it went down. Well, it went badly so much that I think the 3,500 rands worth of R-Chain or the token I had is now worth 30 cents. That is like, I can't even do the math. That's insane.
Yeah. So the general question is, what prevents this endeavor, this Foundry, from going down the same path? Let me answer it from like the worst case scenario perspective first, just because I think it gives a nice firm kind of like a backup plan foundation, if that makes sense. So in the worst case, Skalk and I go total megalomaniac, and we really start making some awful decisions. In that case, there's really nothing stopping from other people from forking everything we've done and starting a new team. Now, to some degree, that's a limited solution because there will be money coming in through the bucket sale, and that treasury currently is held by the Team Toast multisig. So that money, we could say, in this nightmare scenario would be lost. But as far as our wealth in Fry, that would and start again. That is, I would say, that's the backup plan. And I think the other thing to add in there, and it's sort of the same point, but a different way of looking at it, is that there aren't a lot of reins that we have control of. As I say, we have some private keys, but we don't really have a legal entity. We're not buying or managing patents here. Let me put it this way. If another team came and said, look, they're fucking that up, we're going to do it better, it would be trivial for them to simply copy the project and do so. We really don't have, we could not hold on to the community. Okay, that's really the point I'm trying to get to. If the community is upset with us, we can't hold on to the community. We don't have anything that can't be taken away from us. And so not only does that mean that if we start going crazy, it can be rescued from our hands, but also it just means that we're less able to go crazy because there's always this implicit threat of the community could leave if we start fucking it up. And then on top of that, that is what we want to, we want to increase that. As I was saying earlier, if we could get, like, let's say 10 other people on board and involved and decentralize the control, that that's going to make sort of the argument that I just made even stronger, because there won't be any centralized control for us to hold on to.
Can I weigh in?
Oh, let me just say one more thing, and that is that as soon as we start getting an active community, and it's a community of people that show that they can be trustworthy, I don't think we're going to be shy about decentralizing control of the various multi-sigs we have. So to the extent that we do hold the keys, we're happy to safely share the keys with a trusted community. Again, that would be good. It would, again, reduce the centralization and make it harder for some other entity to come threaten us into stopping what we're doing.
If I can weigh in, just because I'm still actually quite a fan of the technology that Archain is building, but clearly, like, things went wrong there on at least a organizational level. I think some of the differences in the organizational level is that I think at least the two public personalities, I don't want to say too much about the non-public personalities, but I mean, I think both me and Logan are deferential to a large degree. I think neither one of us are really like authoritarian at this stage anyway. That's not really like much of a guarantee. The thing is basically that I think each current holder of Fry will be able to voluntarily vest his tokens. It sounds to me like the majority of us will do some variant of that. So in other words, if we do screw up the project, then literally that which we received is worthless, right? And it's provably worthless. We couldn't have exited with it. It'll be on the blockchain. You'll be able to go, look, listen, okay, but these guys, this is what they got, and it's not worth a lot now. I'd say next thing as well, I think even the budgets that we do plan to pull out for the initial period are incredibly low. They're really they are fractions of what this industry charges. You go look at the prices that it costs for Solidity developers and Elm developers. The intersection of those two would be, I mean, there's literally so few people. It's basically people on this team. We really are charging fractions of what Archain, for instance, was putting out of their project. So our only hope for long-term gains here, and this is not taking our word for it. This is how it's getting structured. We have to succeed. If we don't succeed, it's not only a question of we have to be honest and we have to succeed. Otherwise, we get very, very little out of this exercise.
Right. It would be certainly a failure. Let me put it this way: we've invested certainly, and I have invested this has been my full-time job for over a year now, and we've all invested. I've invested mostly time. Skalk has invested money. It would be a poor outcome for anything but this quite long-term, quite bold, shiny, exciting. How can I say? If we didn't achieve what the community is excited about, with Foundry getting successful and with profit coming in and all that, and the decentralized governance, if we don't succeed that, let's say for the sake of argument, what we do is sort of get out personally with some kind of I don't know, maybe we got some of the die in the treasury, assuming we sort of turn evil or whatever. That's still a bad outcome. It was still a bad investment because we spent so much time on this. The only real outcome that we are interested in is the dream, the full dream of Foundry up, doing its own thing, and making it safe to build the projects that we'll need as the world goes a bit crazy.
Cool. I have another question.
Yes, please.
What global economic situations can affect the evaluation of Fry and Foundry?
Okay, that's an interesting question. What global or economic situations? I think Foundry's strength will be to build things that centralized power structures don't want to be built. That's very much its strength. So if, let's say, the centralized power structures continue to become less effective and don't provide the security that people want from them, and given that they also remain authoritarian or continue to become more authoritarian in what they don't, if they are doing more stamping out of other things that are trying to solve the problems, that would be a scenario in which Foundry should flourish, because Foundry specifically will be able to basically say, I don't care about that. I'm going to build solutions and no one can stop me. So that would be a good scenario for Foundry. I would say, and conversely, a bad scenario for Foundry, or one that would seem to not have as much of a need for Foundry, is if suddenly the governments actually start becoming more competent and they start putting less pressure on sort of stamping out other projects. That's one way to answer the question anyway. Does that answer the question, or do you want more?
No, that should be fine. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to mute David. There's a bit of a background.
Welcome, David.
Welcome.
Despite the fact that we just muted you. By the way, we're doing just an update to our two new people who joined. We're doing a Q&A with Logan. We're handing out some fry we're handing out basically like 1,000 fry for every coherent question that's not a duplicate. And we are giving a prize of 10,000 fry for the most challenging question.
And you are tallying these, right? I'm assuming.
Yes. I'm writing down who's asking the questions. Ingrid, I just want to very quickly weigh in on the thing there. What kind of international thing might happen that would increase or decrease the value of the Fry token? So I think the one thing is there are really things like, for instance, so the second most traded commodity in the world is medicine, right? The first most traded commodity in the world is food. Right, so the difference between drugs and medicine is essentially the FDA, right? So the FDA decides what is one and what is the other, basically, right? So lots of these things, lots of medicines have been vilified, like, for instance, steroids. Steroids are incredibly good treatment for, amongst other things, AIDS, burn victims, all kinds of stuff like that. But there are many places in the world where their use is actually criminalized for nothing other than stigma, right? So theoretically, one of the things that and I'm not saying this is what we're building it for, I'm just saying completely theoretically, one of the things that Foundry could fund is it could fund a medicine store where essentially anybody could list any medicine, anybody could buy any medicine, right? So the thing is, there are places where that would already be legal. Like, for instance, in Portugal, it's not legal, but it's decriminalized. So theoretically, you could run it there and people could buy steroids as an AIDS treatment, already today without fear of, prosecution. There are most other jurisdictions, that specific scenario would not be valuable, right? So the freer the world is and more honest the world is, I would say the less it needs something like Foundry. So that would ironically be negative circumstances, like, the more coherent people think about things in government, the less need there is for Foundry, and the more superfluous it is, and the higher its costs really are. So I would say basically that the current world we're in, right, the current configuration of opposition and support is almost ideal for Foundry, in my view, in any way. I think if the opposition really starts to spike, there might be a point where even Foundry doesn't necessarily quite function very well anymore. But if there's still one or two semi-quasi-free jurisdictions, then even then Foundry would be able to still make good products for the rest of the world that might not be free. But that's.
I just, hearing you kind of helped me clarify what is in my mind. And if I could just summarize, I think what both you and I are saying is that the demand for Foundry is a direct function of how much people feel the need to evade centralized top-down restrictions, and get all that out of the way. How much do people want to sort of say, you know what, this is enough regulation, I need to protect some more freedom of my own? The more people have that demand, the more demand there will be for something like Foundry. And yeah.
Okay. All right. So a next question that we have, this I'm actually getting from 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, is okay. Right. So I've got a few questions in quick succession for you here, basically. Right. So the first question is like, what value does Foundry add to the entrepreneurs? In other words, to the people who come to Foundry for funding, what value does it add to them? What value does it add to investors? And then the other question is, does Foundry compete with other DAOs?
Okay.
So those three questions.
To the first, so what does the entrepreneur, what value does the entrepreneur get from engaging with Foundry? So the entrepreneur, just to sort of paint this scenario, would approach Foundry with a proposal, and they could do that either by being a fry holder and going through the mechanism, or by contacting a fry holder and having that fry holder do it for them. But in any case, they bring forward a proposal, and if the entrepreneur, let's say that the entrepreneur, I don't know, let's say he's just had an idea and maybe he wants to do some market research. So he could apply for funding from Foundry and say, look, maybe here's some online reputation I have, so I'm not just a scammer. And what I'd like to do is X, Y, Z, and that will help, that will sort of be the beginning of what might be a profitable venture. So I would like to apply for funding. The reason he would do that, the reason specifically he would approach Foundry, is because he can do so, first of all, pseudonymously. So he can have an idea and approach Foundry. He can put money behind the idea. Nobody even has to know who he is. He just has to, carefully express himself and sort of really put his idea together and put it out there. And if it's a good idea, or I should say if it's a popular idea with the fry holders, he will be supported in that, even though nobody really knows who he is. Now, if he's totally pseudonymous, you might have to work through a little bit of like, how do we trust you? But you can sort of work through that maybe with milestone goals and things like that. But again, the benefit to the entrepreneur is that there's no other entity that you can really approach other than some other DAOs that would even consider funding you, given that you're pseudonymous. So you can target these dangerous projects without becoming a target yourself. That's probably the best way to sum it up. For the investors, it's a very similar benefit. You can hear a proposal from this entrepreneur, and then you can support it. If you're already a fry holder, that support will be in the form of a yes vote on a funding proposal. Or if you're not yet a fry holder, you could look at what Foundry is doing and you could say, oh, these are important / profitable projects. I want to put my money into Foundry and thereby increase the support for this kind of thing. So in both of those ways, that is what the investor gets. And again, they can do this pseudonymously. Nobody has to know who they are. It's even a stronger argument for the investors because they don't need to solve the problem of trust. They just put their money in and start voting. So you can have this cooperation between the entrepreneur and the investors, and every party is protected behind it. This, Foundry is the actor, and they are pieces of Foundry, but the pieces of Foundry have this pseudonymous protection, so they don't need to worry about their own personal identities. Our fragile meat bag selves, we don't have to worry about them being in the crosshairs. And then the third question, could you just repeat the third part of that?
So the third question is, does Foundry compete with other DAOs, or does Foundry have a unique market that can become its own monopoly?
Right. It does compete with other DAOs. I think every DAO, to some extent, let me phrase this carefully. I think the vast majority of DAOs are targeting something like the same thing. I think all the DAOs basically say, look, a conventional organization has certain drawbacks that we don't, that we can build a DAO that gets around those restrictions. That's, in that way, we're competing with other DAOs. I think the unique proposition that we have is that this is quite a bold DAO. We are saying, look, this is specifically to challenge a lot of the power structures out there and to allow people to build solutions that are politically dangerous to build. I think some of the unique value proposition simply comes in the fact that that's what we're doing, that's what we say we're doing, and that's the kind of fry holders that will be interested in voting. So we're kind of conjuring a personality for Foundry that is specifically a bold personality, something that could go to Zimbabwe and say, you know what, let's have a bit of a financial revolution here and let's have everyone switch to DAI instead, and then that would help everybody out. We don't really care if that pisses off Zimbabwe. That, I think, is part of the unique value proposition. The other part is that we have, this is much more technical, but that we have a liquid democracy system that allows you to, as a fry holder, you can vote directly or you can delegate your vote to somebody else. And that basically seems to uniquely, of course, we won't really know until we start testing this stuff, but it seems that, and please read the white paper from on this, but it seems like that would solve a lot of the voter apathy issues and allow quite a nimble intelligence to form, even if a large majority of fry holders don't want to vote directly. So I would say those are the two unique value propositions.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'd just like to say two more things in terms of how our funding works, in terms of if we're batting for the fences or not, right? The one thing is I do think many of the other DAOs are trying to make stuff work within the US legal system. We are trying to avoid the US legal system in its entirety, right? So we don't sell to US citizens. Please, if you're a US citizen, please hold back on yourself. Please don't try to participate. Right? Unfortunately, it's going to make life a lot more difficult for this kind of project. And I think at some future point, there will be a viable entry point for US citizens.
And if I could let me just add to that real quick. Specifically, at a future point, we won't be able to control Foundry anymore, and Foundry will then be free to open itself up to the US investors. So that's, I would say, it's almost like a guaranteed eventuality.
Yeah, so that's the one thing. The other thing is the Foundry works in two sales periods. Right? So there's the initial sale, which we think will, it'll interest whoever it interests. And then there is the perpetual sale part. Right? The perpetual sale part, unlike designs like DXDAO, doesn't really have an exit valve. And what we suspect will happen there is that during exuberant periods, when everyone is completely euphoric about the product and no one's thinking straight, Foundry captures value during those times, and it keeps the value there for the investor. Right. So in other words, the people who own parts of Foundry
so in a stable asset.
In a stable asset. So it's not in an asset that also fluctuates along with the rest of the overexuberance of the market. So the exact numbers were still up in the air a little bit. Mostly we've been talking about 5%. So 5% of the value of Foundry, like in every year, will continuously always be sold in exchange for cash, which will go and sit in the treasury. Right. So if there's an exuberant period where things are overvalued 20x, that means that Foundry can increase its value by twofold, by twice its whole value, and it still has that, after the market crashes, and it can then actually fund new projects that create real value, that actually have cash flows and clients in the future. One of the things that I think give Foundry the capacity to have a monopoly. Many of the other DAOs, they aim for slightly different things, as far as I can tell. They aim for some of them are for qualified investors, some of them are sort of semi-hobby projects without any clear way to make money, as far as I can tell. So currently we're still experimenting. There hasn't been a successful DAO yet. We're not trying to compete with a DAO or the DAO or something else out there that has clearly become the dominant player. So I do think we have the opportunity to become an extremely big entity in the space, and we can scale by spawning off copies of ourselves. But that's a conversation for another time. I'll quickly want.
Can I just want to clarify. Yes, so something you said. I just want to say that there are DAOs out there that function, right? So it's not like we'll be the first functional DAO, but these DAOs typically they take money in and then they have a way of putting out grants. But I would say what we have the chance to do first is to be a successful like profit-focused DAO. I think that is a seat that has not yet been filled adequately. Most of the DAOs that are up and walking around, they do take in money. They do have a way of making intelligent decisions and spending the money. But as far as sort of a reliable profit mechanism where the money comes in, they do profitable projects, and then the profit comes back in and then benefits the token holders, that's something we see Foundry being able to do and that nobody else seems to have really done yet. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, cool. All right, so we have a next question. We have a question from David. David, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I can do that. Can you hear me all right?
Perfectly, sir.
A bit of lag, but it seems totally... Okay, go ahead.
My question is, I actually wrote it down because it's been in quite a long conversation so far. Yes, how does Foundry control risk of investments? Is there any collateralization mechanism or any other mechanism that helps control the risk for an investment that is taken by the DAO as a whole or by individual participating investors? This is essentially my question. How do you control risk of individual investments?
Can I venture a first version to that, and then you can go in?
Sure.
All right. So David, the thing is, we basically we have several ideas of how things might pan out, right? So the one simple thing is essentially that we have sort of a relationship with the fund, where a team can come and they can say, listen, we're going to build this in milestones, right? So we're going to build a online medicine market in milestones, right? Where people can vote on the individual milestones and basically get things through. Now, obviously, that's not really like idealized in terms of how many things could go wrong. If there are 6 milestones and the last one is necessary for the thing to go live, and then Foundry decides to, the Foundry voters decide to abandon the project, then that's obviously a very bad scenario for both the entrepreneur and for the fund, right? But that is one way that we think, because it will be dynamic relationships, we do think that kind of thing might yield some fruit. That's the one thing. The second thing we could do basically is we could have either small projects or milestones based on burnable payments. So if you go look at Die Hard is essentially a burnable payment mechanism where somebody bonds themselves into a specific type of a contract. So what we could do in that scenario basically is that if somebody comes along, let's take the same type of project, somebody comes along with a medicine market that they want to build, and then they say, listen, I've got these 6 milestones and I'm willing to bond my money into each milestone, right? Then the Foundry could either then be the counterparty to the burnable payment, or we could appoint somebody else to be some evaluator to be the counterparty to the burnable payment. There are reasons for that we could get into if you really want to get into the weeds of it, but the result there would be that the team then bonds a smaller amount of money. They gain a certain amount of funding. They have to finish the work before all the funds are returned to them, basically, right? So in that scenario, basically the team can't really screw over the Foundry, and the Foundry has an incredibly high incentive to maintain its reputation as a shrewd business entity that only does business with people who actually finish their work. So that's kind of like on the future deliverable side of it. And then obviously, I think what might be trivial as well, basically, is if somebody comes along and they start adding value to Foundry. So every week we have one of these demo days, right? So and the idea is that we want to expand these demo days, and possibly there might be multiple concurrent demo days. God willingly, if we're successful with this plan, where multiple teams might actually, be running a demo of their stuff, basically. And then the idea would be simpler. Then it's just a question of, we did this work, we did the demo, do you guys agree, do we get paid for this? And then the Foundry basically just votes, listen, cool, we pay the guy his salary this week, or, he's really been slacking off. We don't really feel that it's a valuable project anymore. And there it might be more continuous maintenance, continuous improvement type situations. Like, for instance, one of the things, it's not a great example, but one of the things is we have off-chain sentiment. One of the tools we need to build is off-chain sentiment analysis. So in other words, we need to figure out what is the sentiment of the Fry holders. And there it might be a question of somebody just comes along, he starts building the stuff for us, he demos it every week, and then the Fry tokens just basically tick yes or no on the salary that he has for that week. So those are sort of broadly the three categories that we see, and we feel that we can somewhat massage most projects, even if they're longer term projects, into those three things. What we could also do, that becomes slightly more risky though, is we could basically we could appoint like a temporary committee of multi-sig holders to basically say, listen, manage the project with this team. So in other words, we give the multi-sig holders the funds. Initially, they have full control over the funds, and they manage the project with the actual team who does the delivery. Is that on? Logan, I think you wanted to weigh in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that the one solution of you essentially, if I can rephrase it a bit, Foundry builds a reputation that when somebody adds value, Foundry then pays for the value after it's been delivered, even if Foundry didn't ask for it. That model, you can actually see this at work already in other DAOs. So this is not something that theoretically might happen. I think the only real prerequisite is simply that you start doing it as a DAO, and when you do that, then people will be motivated to sort of gift their things to the Foundry, with the understanding that if it adds value, Foundry will gift them, some kind of compensation. And then that, it doesn't need to be a total guess either. This can be after long discussions on the forum where you simply notice that, okay, I suggested to this thing and 60% of the Fry holders said that they would vote yes for a proposal. That would allow you to, with pretty high assurance, especially given a good reputation for the DAO, you could say, okay, well, I'll just do it, and I have a good chance of being paid, even without engaging any kind of game theoretical smart contracts. That's all I wanted to add.
Does that answer your question, David?
Yes, essentially it really does. So you don't have any built-in mechanisms so far or envisioned, and you're kind of going through this in a social gatekeeper process. This is how I've kind of described it in the chat. Yes, this has answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, I do want to say the one thing we do actually have. Well, it's not that others don't have this. It's just that others don't use this. Is we do have the burnable payment mechanism of diehard. So we can actually have teams who contract with the DAO bond themselves to actually fulfill their responsibilities.
And that would be particularly useful if you don't have reputation. So earlier I was saying you might have to solve the trust thing if you're an entrepreneur who wants to do something. One way to solve that very trivially would be to say, look, I've created a burnable payment with myself as the recipient of the money. I've put in my bond. Here's what I would like to do. And then you do this knowing that Foundry has a good reputation of burning the payment if you don't deliver and releasing it if you do. And that is a way where Foundry still risks the person being incompetent. Maybe they didn't deliver on something they thought they would, and then they will burn the money, but at least then you're not getting ripped off. Okay, it was a bad investment, but at least you didn't get scammed. So that, it just allows you to bootstrap a lot of trust in that way. So yeah, that could be another mechanism.
Oh, excellent. I didn't know about that. Thank you. This is a very valuable addition.
You're muted, Skulk. Skulk, you're muted. You're muted, Skulk.
Oh, sorry, David. I'm just saying thank you for the question. It was actually quite a valuable question so far. Please drop me your contact details somewhere in the chat or something. I don't know on which channel we found you, but I like to retain all the new people.
Yeah.
Okay.
In general, if you ask a question, make sure to leave some kind of contact, something. At the very least, a crypto address, so we could thank you for the questions.
Yeah. By the way, we are handing out Fry to all the questions, and to the really challenging question, we'll have a prize. Okay. So our next question is I guess less challenging, but maybe slightly embarrassing. Dion asks us, how has the uptake in Zim been? Yeah. So we are all okay. So Logan here went to Zimbabwe for quite a while, and I think, Logan, over to you. Like tell us what the Zimbabwean situation is and why we have been unable to pursue that maybe up until now.
Right. So the Zimbabwean thing, I spent 2 months in Zimbabwe essentially doing market research for diehard. So this is some months ago, I'm just going to guess 5 or 6 months ago, we were looking at how do we start to market diehard, and we didn't really have much of we knew that there would have to be a DAO, but it was very much down the road for us. We weren't really focused on doing that immediately. Anyway, so I went to Zimbabwe, And I wrote what's called the ZimDi white paper. This is an interesting thing. I would suggest you just Google that. You'll find it pretty quick. You'll see Logan Bridge is the author, and just to know you have the right one. Basically, what we got from that and what is described in the white paper is, okay, if you have a marketing budget, how would you bootstrap dye adoption in Zimbabwe, and would it help? The answer we came to is yes, it would help. And then how would you do it? Well, that's a long answer I won't get into here. But please read the white paper and contact me with any questions. I really love talking about it. Now, as far as the uptake in Zimbabwe, when we really started thinking about how to approach it, it's part of what led us to start focusing on the sale. And it's again something, it's like Die Hard itself, where we feel not exactly comfortable pushing this ourselves directly. It's one thing to write a white paper, it's another thing to start marketing the thing with my name or my face on it to essentially trigger a financial revolution. I mean, I'm even nervous about simply saying that in a public forum as it is. But that is the intent of the white paper. Part of the reason that we didn't push it forward and didn't start marketing it was we need more of a shield in front of us, and then that's what led to Foundry. And again, Foundry, well, we didn't have a name for it, but we'd always thought part of the long-term plan was to put a DAO up that could contain these projects and continue them. And ZimDi is another one. We don't mention it often simply because it's a white paper. The state of the project is it's a white paper that describes how anyone could do this given a marketing budget. The other two things are profitable projects. So we feel that's much more relevant given that this is a DAO. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Foundry got a lot of engagement and the treasury was growing beyond the point where we can just spend it on sort of like my salary and marketing for these products. I would not at all be surprised if Foundry really quickly started orienting on the ZimDi thing. There is a profit motive there, although it's more, I would say, sort of more indirect. You'd have to do a lot more work to get there. And the meaning of the exercise is immense, you know, and if the FRI holders vote to engage in that pursuit largely because of the meaning of it, there's nothing really wrong with that either. So yeah, I hope that does that answer the question.
Yeah, he says yes. Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And again, just to emphasize, please, if you want to talk more about it, I'm happy to, you know, really take some time out of my day and just go through everything. And it's something that's very close to my heart. And the only reason that it's just the real world concerns of money and profit and stuff that has pulled me away from it. So yeah, please get in contact if you are so inclined.
Okay. Yeah. So I have a few questions in terms of, not really questions, but I want to make this observation about something interesting about a thing like Foundry, for instance, is Foundry I think is a very pure entity in terms of kind of like what it aims to do. It aims to get money and it aims to invest that money into projects that make it more money. I think one of the efficiencies though of that purity is that at its core layer there isn't much to tax. Right, there isn't much to, you can't really take any money out of the Foundry treasury. You can't really take any Foundry tokens unless somehow you gain them from Foundry members. Maybe just comment on that efficiency a bit, because the thing is, I mean, lots of entities that that do business and have to reinvest those funds. Basically, as they make profits, those profits get taxed away or get eroded to some degree at least. Now, it's still definitely possible for people, for tax authorities and regulators to tax FRI holders, but FRI itself doesn't really have a mechanism like that. Now, the thing is, what do you think, Logan, over time the effect will be of having 25% or more of your own resources over time. By the way, welcome to. Okay, sorry. I see. Somebody just changed their name to Bingles. I thought we had a new participant. Well, welcome anyway, Bingles. Maybe just comment on that aspect of it. How do you think a fund would perform that is constantly having to give away 25% of its new incomes to protection money versus a fund that gets to keep all its incomes and its members might be taxed?
Yeah, I mean, I think I almost wonder if it's a bit of a leading question because the answer is a good one for Foundry. I mean, it's quite simple. It is a structure that will be resistant to taxation. And if you are a fry holder, it's going to be very easy for you to hold fry in a way that nobody even knows you have it. So that fry, any government in the world could look at that and they won't even know it's in their jurisdiction to try to tax at all because it's just a pseudonymous address. Now, of course, that takes a little bit of, let's say, competence with digital privacy to really make that like a watertight thing. And if you're a very large fry holder, you'd want to maybe put some more effort into making sure that your privacy is watertight in that way. But
sorry, Logan, I think
I would be pretty shocked if anything more than small.
But Logan, I don't know about the others, but you broke up for me for almost all of that.
Let's see. Can anybody confirm or deny? Because if it was just you, I suspect the recording was still good.
You also broke up for me as well.
Yeah, couldn't hear you either.
Okay, what was the last thing?
I think literally from when you started answering.
That you heard before the breakup.
I asked you the question and you started breaking up, basically.
That was a chain of thought. All right, so basically, the entity itself, Foundry itself, won't be taxed. And I started by saying, like, I almost feel like it's a leading question because the answer is quite good for Foundry. I mean, it's simply more efficient because the system itself can't be taxed, you know. The money that you can put money in and take it out later, and you'll get everything you got out plus the gains or minus the losses, of course, if it's a terrible disaster. But what you don't lose is the tax. And now individual fry holders, in theory, can be targeted, but it's very easy as a fry holder to just to hold fry in such a way that nobody knows that you have it. And so there will be large chunks of fry out there that, let's say you're a government, you're looking at that. You don't even have a clue that it's in your jurisdiction. So you don't even begin asking the question of how do we tax that fry. You might maybe in theory start trying. It's more conceivable that a government would say, okay, there's a lot of cryptocurrency around here and we need to start taxing that. So then they'll start trying to figure out, you know, who has a lot of cryptocurrency. But if you are reasonably competent in internet security and privacy, you can protect yourself from that quite a bit. And if you have lots and lots of crypto or fry, then you'd want to be more careful. But I want to say the technology is on your side, and it will become more that way with opting out of tax with these assets. So.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions at this point? Really, like, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I have two. The one is maybe tying in with this a bit. I was thinking about the lawsuit that the Tezos Foundation recently got slapped with, and also governments globally trying to regulate crypto. So does Team Toast feel confident that Foundry won't be targeted or prosecuted in future? And in that vein, as a fry holder, token holder, and therefore being a voter, does that put me at risk?
Yeah, so there's a lot of answers to the question. Well, let me rephrase that. The answer is that we have different measures in place for that worry. I mean, one of the things is that simply that you can be pseudonymous. And so you can enter into Foundry and you can say, look, regardless of what Foundry's legal attacks are. I myself, the individual here, can't even really be found out as a Fry holder now. Obviously, that's not an option for me in Skulk, so we've added a bit more to that as well. One of the things is that before the sale launches, we're going to have an entity in Georgia, and that will be the legal representation of Foundry. As much as I personally just wish I could just ignore the entire legal system, what that does is it allows us to say, okay, if you want to legally attack this, here's our representation. It's in Georgia, which itself should be a bit of a labyrinth to get through, because you got to go. It's not like we're doing this in the U.S., you know. And then a big thing also is that we're not operating with U.S. citizens, and we've really put a lot of effort into keeping them out. And I'm saying this as a U.S. citizen, it makes me sad, but the reason we're doing that is because the SEC is the primary major risk of a project like this. It's that they'll go after you but even they mostly go after you if it seems like you've really screwed people. But then again, with Tezos, it's hard for me to find the real ethical problem there, and yet they were sued. But then also Tezos really engaged quite fully in the legal system, and I think we get a certain amount of protection by engaging a bit, but not much. And again, we're largely off the radar of the SEC to the extent that we can exclude Americans from the sale. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to weigh in on that as well. So, so David does say here that the SEC assumes global jurisdiction. That is partially true, right? So the SEC very quickly, like in terms of what we put in place for protecting ourselves against running afoul of the SEC. The first thing is we do have quite technical things that cannot be defeated by a simple VPN to keep people inside of the United States from participating. So if you're inside of the United States and you somehow participated in the sale, you went through several loops, all of those loops telling you that, listen, you're not allowed on this side of the fence. And that's not going to be straightforward, right? So the majority of the guys are excluded from that thing, right? So what the SEC views as their jurisdiction, though, is generally it seems to be that the US views US citizens as their jurisdictions, right? So which explains a lot. It explains why they start wars in other countries to protect US interests and that kind of thing. So our current play on the thing is that we are going to go out of our way to make sure that no US citizen really can enter this thing, and that they definitely then can't turn around and tell any sort of a rational judge that they did it completely ignorantly and that we somehow solicited them. Right, that's not going to be a case that stands up in court. The second thing is that the SEC very clearly views themselves as being, when you have the following scenario where you have investors and a management group, where the investors cannot control the outcome of the endeavor, but the management group does. The SEC views themselves as protecting the investors from the management group. Right, so that's like the primary difference we have as well. For a very short period of time, we will constitute a sort of a management group, right? So we're going to spend incredibly small amounts of money during this period, which again, like given our other safeguards, shouldn't even like feature. And if anybody has any beef with how we did that, it's definitely shouldn't be featuring in a US court as to that. After that very, very short period of time, we're going to have a member-managed organization. So a member-managed organization is essentially where there is no management, and shareholder class. There's only a shareholder class, right? So what the liquid democracy does give us is it gives us the capacity to say, listen, everyone, including someone who had no tokens, theoretically speaking, could have actually influenced the direction of this thing, and it was entirely up to the shareholders, not the shareholders, the token holders in this regard, to say which direction the actual like funds would spend in, right? So just to quickly enumerate those things, basically is we're not marketing to any US citizens, right? We are not, and we're going to be a member-managed organization once we exist in our entirety. Right. Once the not we really. Once the Foundry exists in its entirety, it's going to be a member-managed organization, and neither me nor Logan basically can control it at that point. And that's not a vague claim. That's a legitimate claim. Once the full version 1 governance is in place, me and Logan have very little control over this thing. Right. So as to your question about what happens if that kind of a lawsuit does happen, the worst case scenario there basically is that for some reason Americans proxy themselves into our sale, and for some reason they force us to settle with them. Right. So what could happen there is that me and Logan are obligated to, we are somehow held accountable for some of that. Right. But that doesn't affect Foundry, and it doesn't affect the funds under Foundry's control. Foundry remains a completely member-managed organization, and the remaining members in Foundry will control the entire thing. So even if that were possible, and it shouldn't be possible given our current structuring, that we are somehow prevented or something from further participation in Foundry, Foundry will still exist and it will still continue, and its contracts will still be live on the mainnet, and it will still actually be making money from the continuous sale and from its existing products.
Can I ask a question here?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Obviously you'll require a constant stream of marketing going forward. Yes?
Yes.
To promote projects, obviously.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Yep.
Yeah, and just to add a bit to that, we have a published document on how we intend to spend the money in the time between when the sale starts and the governance is up. That can be found on our on foundrydao.com. In fact, I'm just going to find that now and put the link in the chat and make sure it is easy to find there. Also, Skulk, I think it might be good to just cut it out here. We've done an hour and a half now, and we should just do the same thing next week. And also, a suggestion I have is, if you want to ask a question, feel free to let us know now or anytime soon.
I think let's have David ask his question. Like we really like our one deficit is community engagement. David is engaging, so let's run with that.
Okay, David, let's hear it.
So I have a question connected to the continuous sale. So other organizations, let's put this in general terms, also have this model. Fairmint, for instance, from France, what they have is this bonding curve approach that they offer to general investors into a certain organization, whereas they have kind of a market maker or a buyer and seller of last resort, which is represented by a smart contract, thereby giving a certain predictability to the general financial investment of an investor into such an organization. My question is, are you aware of this? Have you considered maybe other mechanisms of actually encoding the permanent or continuous sale as a smart contract, or what are you pursuing, essentially, strategically speaking?
Well, yeah, so the bonding curve is something we did explore. And this was a while ago, so I'm a bit fuzzy, but the general problem we ran into is that if you have a bonding curve and then you spend some of the funds there, you have to change the way that the lines work on the bonding curve, because let's assume the buying and selling bonding curve is the same. So if you can buy in and sell, and as long as the treasury is never touched, you can buy, everyone can buy and everyone can sell, and there's no the last fool who tries to exit and can't because the money's not in there. But as soon as you take out something from the treasury, things get a little weird. So and I don't want to go all the way into this, but let me just sort of give you a taste of how this gets weird. So you have so many people buy in, and then you say, we're going to spend money on this marketing drive or whatever. As soon as you announce that, it's actually in everybody's interest, every single individual's interest, to sell before you drain the treasury. Then you drain the treasury and the curve goes like this. And then you buy back in now that you're at a low, now that the line is lower. And the problem there is that then every time you announce you're going to spend money, it's in the rational self-interest of people to pull out before you do and put in after you do, which then means you might not even have the money to do it. And you can try to sort of patch this up in different ways, but it seemed like there's a more fundamental problem there that it was really hard to fix. So, and another way to answer your question is that people can, well, I should say, fryholders can vote in a buyback mechanism, and that would be a reversal of the sale, where you say, okay, the proposal is to take half the treasury or whatever. We're going to put it into this contract, where the contract does the opposite thing of the sale. Where the sale takes in dye and then mince fry, this buyback contract would take in fry and burn it, and then release dye proportionally in the same way the sale proportionally releases fry. So that's an option that's always available to fry holders. It's not a constantly running, always live thing like the sale is, but it's something that is always on the table for proposers to make. And I don't think I'm speaking, I could speak for me and Skulk when we say if it seems like that is a proposal that has community support, we're happy to basically help build that contract and make sure the contract can be there for that use.
All right, can I weigh in here as well? All right, so part of the thing is that yes. Okay, so recently I went through through most of the continuous organization white paper that DXDAO is based on, and I think it really it has some good ideas in it. There are some strange things that start to happen, right? So for one thing, they say that the fair token is definitely not definitely passes the Howey test. I'm not really clear that it definitely passes the Howey test, right? I think that's a longer conversation for a different time.
And just for anybody who doesn't understand, doesn't key to that word, the Howey test, without getting into the details, it determines how much the SEC will get angry at you and come after you. So I just want to relate that for anybody who isn't comfortable with that term.
Yeah. So that's kind of the one thing. The second thing is that it does make the entire organization of the thing very difficult to manage, right? So it starts to become over, especially once you actually have to program the thing, and you have to, one of the things we try to do is have exhaustive test cases for all possible scenarios. You really, you start to see it there. You start to see an incredibly complex organism, basically. And I'm not saying the guys from DXDAO haven't addressed these issues, but at least from the white papers that they cite to today, there are problems that they should have solved. I'm not saying they didn't. They're very they're a very diligent bunch of Germans, but there are things there that I see as being somewhat strange and creating weird edge cases that might be dangerous going forward. That's the one thing. The other thing as well is basically that part of what we've tried to do with the way that Foundry deals with its ownership, at least, is it tries to. There's this thing called the fund manager's paradox, and the fund manager's paradox is this whole thing about if you're a hedge fund manager and you've got a hypothesis, right? So you've got alpha on how you want to make money, and you put that out into the market. The problem is that unless you can sell people on how exactly your strategy is going to make money, you don't get any money. You get very, very little money. Then if your strategy is successful and you have like a 10x or 100x return, now what happens is a lot of people come to you and they go like, wow, you were really successful, Mr. Fund Manager. Here's a lot of money. The problem is just that your strategy has already expired now. You've already made the money. Now you're taking a lot of money, and you don't necessarily have a follow-up strategy directly correct. And even if you do, you don't know if it's going to be another 10 or 100xer. So then what happens is over time you underperform, you lose money. Somewhere during this period of you losing money, you might come up with a secondary alpha strategy where you go, hey, wait a minute, this is actually great. I should run with this. And now you're on the other side of the market where nobody's interested in giving you money. So the slight way that we try to address that paradox is we actually go, well, listen, if there are these exuberant periods, we actually capture value, right? So in other words, the continuous sale is sort of one directional. It keeps going into the treasury, and we capture that value for the governance mechanism. Now, when things are actually going downwards, it doesn't really matter. It's actually good for the Foundry because it has funds that it can now go, okay, well, if we have longer term, real legitimate plans, regardless of when they show up, we can actually fund those and go forward. Yeah, so that's very briefly my some of my feedback on it, but I'd love to have a more in-depth discussion with you about the various DAO designs if you want.
Thank you. That was insightful.
Okay, cool. I think let's cut it at this point, though. Thank you very much, everyone. I think the last thing we need to decide, though, is who asked the most challenging question. So yeah, so I think the best way to do this would be, Logan, which question did you find the most fundamentally challenging? Okay, well, it seems like Logan has some temporary connection issues. Either that or he's thinking really deeply at the moment. Guys, what of the questions that everyone asked, maybe what questions did you find the most challenging? Okay, guys, give me 1 second. I'm just going to quickly try to. I'm just going to quickly try to regain access to Logan. Give me 1 second. Sorry for this delay, guys. It's way to go, internet. Come to voicemail. LNA Bengals, you are welcome to vote for yourselves. So we have 1 vote LNA, well, we have a half vote David, a half vote LNA. Who do you guys vote for? Who asked the most challenging question?
Hey, sorry about that. I don't know if you even heard my message at the end.
No, we were asking who you felt asked the most challenging question, and you will actually see yourself still staring at us very stoically at the moment.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah, my computer started to die, and then it was acting very weird. Let me. Who asked the most challenging question? I think I'd have to look through them actually to make that decision. Yeah.
Okay, so can I?
Oh, all right. So, yes.
All right. So LNA actually asked 4 questions. I can't remember all 4 now. LNA, do you want to quickly just repeat the 4 you asked? You asked us basically what protects us from ending up the same way that Tezos Foundation ends up. You asked us what would happen to you as an investor if the same thing happened. I can't remember the first 2 questions. And then Ingrid, you asked us 2 questions as well. The first one was kind of like what prevents Foundry from building really evil stuff. I can't remember the second one right now. Dion asked us.
Also, the third one was, would it require constant marketing as well?
Oh, would it require constant marketing? Yeah, that was, what was the first one or the second one then?
Yeah, first one was, a question about funding criminal activities. The second one was, what was it about? So the third one was about marketing, and then the second one was about the effect of global economic situations.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, David, you had your questions were regarding, let's just quickly run through them here. Your questions were regarding how do we ensure that teams deliver? I like that question a lot, actually. That would be my vote. And what was your second question, David?
My second question was about the continuous sale and whether you have explored and were planning to implement any smart contract encoded policy with regards to who can buy in, who can cash out, and all of these things. And you have answered this question saying that the continuous sale is continuously open and that you currently plan to have the option to have a separate contract where that inverses the relationship where you take crypto and swap for Fry, where then you can burn Fry and swap for DAI. Yeah.
Okay. So Logan, I think since you were asked all these hard questions, which one of these questions you find the hardest?
Yeah, okay, so as you were talking, I just noted the ones that are, for me, candidates. So there was the one about what prevents us from being another Tezos. There was one about criminal activity. Then there was sort of what economic scenarios, how would that change Fry? I think that one in particular I like because it was one that we haven't been asked yet. And then there was how do we ensure that teams will deliver, and have we considered something like bonding curves? Yeah, it's a tough choice. I think the question about criminal activity and drugs, for example, I think that is the most interesting one to talk about in a way. The economic scenarios one was probably the most novel question to me. Yeah. And you had a different favorite, right? Did you say the Tezos one was your favorite?
Well, I kind of like the one basically. To be honest, the biggest one for me is just essentially is will we deliver? So will we deliver, and how will we deliver? And I suppose that's the second question. So biases aside, I do think the second question for me is the most challenging one. Is will we actually see this through, or will we cash out and go sit on beaches?
And actually, now that because the way you phrase the context is the contest is the most challenging, and actually I would agree that is the most challenging. It may be the most nervous, I'll say. So I think I'm actually in agreement with you there. That was the most challenging one. Yeah.
Okay, so question number 2, it was phrased as remembering the R-chain fiasco, what would keep the team toes from floundering down the same destructive path? Okay. Okay, cool. Well, that's the clear winner then. Guys, I'm going to quickly I posted a link to our Telegram. So if you guys join our Telegram, please, and just give us your MetaMask addresses. Our Foundry token is now live. By the way, the sale's going live next week, Friday. If you're not a US citizen and your country doesn't, heads on stakes for participating in these things, please go have a look at it. But if you join our Telegram in the meanwhile, basically, and you just drop us your individual Ethereum addresses, we will drop you some Fry tokens.
Yep, and also tell you how to sort of tweak MetaMask to make sure they show up. Although they might show up automatically, I'm not sure. But anyway, we'll also make sure that you can see them in your wallet. But I feel like I'm a little worried now we're actually confusing two questions, or because I feel like the one question was how do we ensure that the team will deliver, and then wasn't it a different question of how do we avoid the fiasco that happened to R-chain, or was that the same question?
I think that's to someone who wasn't me or you who asked the question. How do we avoid the R-chain fiasco? The question also came up from the continuous organization white paper questions. That's why it might feel like it was.
Okay, so we really only have one actual candidate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Guys,
thank you very much for showing up, and thank you for the questions. Yeah.
Awesome sauce. Okay, we're here every Friday at 12 UTC. Next week, our sale goes live. If you want to watch, by the way, Dion, I see you say, pity you missed the previous sessions. They're all on YouTube. We record them all or live stream them all. You guys are welcome to go look. The first 2 sessions that we did were actually demos of the existing products on the sale. You guys can actually go look at the stuff that's already live at the moment. Okay, thanks, David. Yeah, really appreciate your participation there. It was quite useful as well to us. Thanks.
Yep, and remember, the next demo day will actually be the launch of the sale.
Yeah.
It will be watching the countdown timer, right? So maybe we should actually make the demo day start 15 minutes early, because then we'll all be sort of together for the, for the countdown. I'm just now putting that together in my head. Yeah, cool.
Okay, sweet.
All righty. Okay, thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, Dion. Cheers, man.